I just got 18 minutes after 3. You're watching Today only on eNCA. Now, the Trialogue, a Business in Society conference, was held this week in Sandton. It showcased important developments across the corporate social responsibility sector. Now, with the elections around the corner, Chancellor of the University of the Free State and author Professor Bonang Mohale delivered an address on ethical business leadership on how to heal a divided country. Mohale addressed issues that the country faces and highlighted the role that business plays in supporting democracy and the responsibility it has to lead and to vote. Professor Mohale, as always, a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for your time. Just looking at, one would argue, the perennial problems the country faces 30 years into democracy have actually perpetuated, and what would be the reasoning behind it, and how did the conference attempt to address these kind of questions?
Mama be ke a leboa ka nnete ntumelle ke kale ka wisa matshidiso a tibileng ho leloko le lelapa la Phetogo Junior Phalane ka kodua e re hlahetseng bohle. We talk about the triple challenges, but if we want to be reflective and thoughtful, really there's only one challenge. It's the stubbornly high levels of unemployment that then lead to increasing levels of poverty and increasing levels of inequality. Therefore, I think we need to start by saying, if wealth is the logical and inevitable outcome of both hard work and enterprise, then every woman in Africa should be a dollar billionaire. Isn't it amazing that 30 years into democracy, poverty still has primarily a black and feminine face? Primarily because we didn't think deeply, profoundly enough about what are we going to do when we assume political office but not in power, as to how we are going to use this to change both the system and the systematic economy of this country. Because it is still the same as we inherited it. Provide cheap labor, go and get the gold. Britain has the first right of refusal. Dig the diamonds in the belly of the earth, risk it all so that the London sales organization can determine the price. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. It doesn't happen with any other product or service except when it comes to Africa. All
right, let's just come back to the solutions, because, you know, it's very easy at the top of your mind to highlight what the challenges are, and these have just increased and perpetuated over the years. So what is it that the conference then aimed to achieve that is measurable and where you can actually see the meaningful change of the quality of life of many people?
So first, I think all of us were unanimous in saying we have an opportunity on the 29th of May to elect the leadership that is able and equal to this task. Number two, we said there's a role for all of us as the four social partners. As business, imagine if business stopped financing the political parties and individuals for the first time in the history of our country, commensurate to the representation, but actually agitate and orchestrated that will fund only those organizations and individuals that sign up to no more than 5 things. Transformation, number one, because this economy has to look like us, otherwise it's not sustainable. Ethical leadership, good governance, but also service delivery, because that is the job description of these political leaders. Lastly, law and order, safety and security, because without law and order, safety and security, who are we and what are we? We can understand that we are not safe in the streets, but Phetogo was not safe in his own driveway, in his own home.
You brought up the issue of party funding, which is very prominent, I guess, this in the year of electioneering, where many of the party funders themselves are very prominent, established business. So if you're saying that we need to change that kind of focus and allocate the funds elsewhere, what modality would that take?
So first, it's about accepting that as business, really we want to be a trusted advisor. At the moment, we're not trusted. A partner of choice, to do everything in our power to make sure that this is a capable state. For us to do that, we need to admit to our own sins, that we have Steinhoff's, KPMG, Bain & Company, PwC, SAP, as some of the corrupt amongst us. Therefore, business itself needs a serious intervention to steer it back. And what's needed today is decisive and incisive leadership in business. Because business is not our second, but our last chance.
Let's talk about the social, corporate or social investment and responsibility that many companies have, and foundations with billions and billions of rand set aside primarily to deal with societal, socio-economic challenges. But we know that the compliance or the criteria for application is quite cumbersome and stringent, and many other NGOs are not able to tap into that resource. Is that one of the reasons why the funds are either taken back into the coffers of the established business or utilized for other purposes?
Cindy, you're absolutely correct, because you've hit the nail on the head. If we stopped seeing CSI as a tick box exercise, we would then say, how is this money going to have an impact? And the first democratically elected president says education is the shortest way in which one can transcend social classes. All the companies in this country have a CSI program. All of them, without fail, have about 4 focal areas. All of them, one of those 4 has to do with education. If we looked at these companies in the centerpiece of the peoples of the eye, and we don't even ask them to make more profits, to simply say there's a small debt of historical debt fund, which in 2022 the Department of Higher Education and Training puts at 16.5 billion, 9.2 billion of which is irrecoverable. And we say to these companies, maybe what you can do is to use the funds already approved by your own board into a historical debt fund, no less than a measly million rand in 1 year. Not in 30 years of democracy, would have wiped off the entire 16.5 billion, because 100,000 young children have actually finished their studies but are unable to graduate because they owe these 26 public universities a little bit of money.
And also, I mean, it's the prerogative of the institutions themselves to decide what kind of social investment programs that they're going to fund. I'll give you an example. Sometimes it will have to do with animal rights or the protection of wildlife, which is, again, their prerogative. Meanwhile, we're sitting with a high levels of poverty amongst young children and not adequate early childhood development programs. So how do you then find the balance, which comes first, while we have all these funds available to deal with societal issues?
Because as a company, we are capable of focusing on things that genuinely matter, not on vanity projects. So if we say we take seriously the fact that youth is not the future but current leadership, I think we need to be true to ourselves to say, then let's not swell the ranks of the unemployed. Let's allow this leadership to reclaim their self-worth and self-respect so that they stop the humiliation and the violence of self-perpetuating abject poverty, of food insecurity, but also period poverty, by saying we're going to ensure that when we educate them, it is possible for them to be born poor in Alexander. But after 23 years of hard work and application, they are able to afford a house in the leafy suburbs of Branston. Not because they won a tender, because they've earned it, they deserve it, and they can afford it.
Okay, let's talk about your theme around connection, collaboration, and change, of which came out of the conference together with your partners, of course, the NGOs, business and civil society. The practical steps of what we can do, because, you know, social grants, we were just talking off air, that these have increased to 28 million people, South Africans, dependent on state security. That was not the case prior to 1994. But our parents were able to make do, to make a plan with the little that we have, innovate, and pull with the strength of the community to put food on the table and keep some order in our society.
It is true that we are poorer now in the last 15 years of the 30 years of democracy than we were before. It is also true that our rand buys us less in the last 15 years than in the 15 years before. It is also true that we inherited less than 2 million people on social security. Our job was to ensure that we give these people dignity by providing them with jobs so that they can buy their own homes, not to give them RDP houses. When we swell the numbers by tenfold to 28 million people on social security, it can't be a badge of honor it should be a gigantic failure, because all of us want to have something to lose and something to fight for. And at the moment, a majority of our people don't have anything to lose. That's why they will ban the library and the fire engine, the only one that serves their community.
So what do you say now as we wrap, Professor Mohale, especially now leading up to the elections, 11 days to go, with some political parties saying they will even double the social grant for as they try and entice voters to choose them?
I think let's vote only for those parties that will make the quality of lives of the majority of our people better. A better life for all, not just for elected officials. I think we need to take seriously this notion that simply says 5 countries in the world were worse than us. They also received aid. But after only 20 years, they were giving aid. At the time that 60 years of African leaders are now holding a conference about how to ask for better forms of aid. Amongst them, it's really Germany and Japan and South Korea and even Singapore. All of them much worse than most African countries. In fact, in 1960, Ghana gave aid to Singapore. But 20 years later, South Korea's economy was 20 times bigger than that of Ghana.
All right, we really appreciate your insights, and I'm sure it's online where people can read at leisure your powerful presentation that you made at the 17th Annual Trialogue Business in Society Conference. We're speaking to Chancellor of the University of Free State and author Bonang Mohale. Thank you so much for your time. Still to come here.